Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to episode 3 of the Frozen Forties. So it's Bank Holiday Monday and we're doing another historic weather video, and of course the third and final part of the Frozen Forties trilogy, which is going to be looking at winter of 1941-1942. Another third in a trilogy of cold winters and freezing cold Januaries, also with this one colder later on in the winter as well. So going to be some interesting charts to look at. We're going to pick it up exactly where we left off with episode 2, which we finished in June of 1940. So we'll pick the storyline up from there, and I'll talk you through 1941-1942 in a moment. I just say a huge thank you to all of you for sharing your bank holiday with me on this bank holiday Monday. I'm always blown away and amazed that people want to spend like half an hour with us at Gasworthy's on their bank holiday. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. And yeah, just huge thank you to all of you for being with us on this bank holiday Monday. So the website's using for the historic web video, of course, a historic archive of charts coming from weathercentral.de, and a lot of the information, all of the information that you hear in this video is coming from Trevor Harley's personal weather website. So, as I always say, I'm like the smallest cog in the wheel with this. I'm just like the narrator of the story, bringing it together. But it really is like the historic charts, along with the information that we hear from Trevor Harley, but makes the historic weather videos what they are, I think. So, a big thank you to Weather Central for the historic archive of charts, and a big thank you to Trevor Harley as well for his personal weather website. The link to both those websites in the description with the video at YouTube, and also, of course, on the links page, famous links page, at gavsweathervids.com. Right, so I think that's pretty much everything that I've got to tell you. It's going to be a long video, of course. If you can't watch it all in one go, then don't worry. It'll be kept at gavsweathervids.com indefinitely, and it will form part of the historic weather video playlist on YouTube. So it'll be easy for you to be able to come back and watch it on demand whenever you would like to do that. There will be, hopefully, a couple of breaks through this. So you'll be able to go off and have a bit of rest, and come back to it and whatnot. Okay, let's get on with it then. And we're going to start off, as I say, we're picking up exactly where we left off with this episode 2, looking at 1941. So we're picking things up exactly where we left off, and this is the 1st of July 1941. Now, July 1941 was actually the hottest month of the war years. There was a warm and mostly dry start. The weather became hot. You can see why. This ridge of high pressure building in from the Azores High into the UK and into Western Europe as well. That's bringing proper hot conditions, the ridge from the blessed Azores High there. There's the upper air temperatures for the 3rd of July. You can see it is a pretty hot day, really, across most parts of the country, particularly so for England and Wales. We go through to the 4th of July, and we actually bring down some cooler air from the northwest, but not for long. The high pressure then begins to re-establish over to the east of the country. That starts to drag up some very warm, if not hot air from the south. Look at the upper air temperatures shooting up, plus 10 Celsius isotherm, pushing into northern England, and plus 15 is down across southwestern parts of England. Hotter still on the 8th of July, again, real hot southerly wind, then 15 Celsius isotherm is lifting into southern parts of England. But here comes the thundery breakdown for the 9th and into the 10th. This low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, hitting this hot and humid air that's established across the country. That is what provides the thundery breakdown. July 1941 actually has a centering temperature of 17.3. As I say, it is the hottest month of the war years, from sort of September 1939 through to May 1945, or July 1945. It is the hottest May 1945, isn't it? It is the hottest July of the war years. So, proper thundery low there developing on the 12th of July, and Trevor Harley says that there was 80 millimetres of rain in 100 millimetres at Penn in Buckinghamshire on the 13th from a torrential thunderstorm. There's the upper air temperatures again, they're looking really hot. There's that thundery low continuing through to the 15th, and now, of course, the temperature is gradually starting to lower and gradually starting to cool down. As we move into the second part of the month, well, we still keep quite a bit of high pressure around the country, but temperatures do become cooler and fresher, but not for all that long. By 25th, again, we're bringing up some really warm air from the south once more, turning even hotter, actually. Not sure what the temperature reached with this, but I'm sure it must have been above 30 degrees across much of England and Wales, with that 15 Celsius ice firm pushing northwards. Of course, at this time, the Second World War is still going on. The Blitz is over. The Blitz ended, I think, in May of 1941, but many parts of the UK have been very badly damaged by the Blitz, and of course, the war is still raging. Across Europe. The Second World War is still going on at this point. It will continue to do so, not just through this winter, but also through the next 3 subsequent winters as well. So we come up to the end of July, and we find that we begin to pull down some cooler air from the north as this low pressure starts to move away into the North Sea. So that starts to bring some cooler air down from the north, and that really starts to set the scene then for August, which is a very, very different month indeed. So after the hot July with a CT of 17.3, August 1941 is cool and very wet with a CT of only 14.7. What a contrast between the 2 months of July and August 1941. And here's the reason why. As we go through the first week of August 1941, the Azores High, which had been ridging in a lot through July, that starts to pull back into the Atlantic. The jet stream begins to align northwest to southeast, and here we go. We start to move autumnal areas of low pressure in from off the Atlantic. So after that hot July, we get a very autumnal August, with again low pressure off the east coast of Scotland on the 14th, bringing gale force winds and no doubt bouts of really heavy rain with it as well. And things just get worse as we go to the second half of the month. As the jet stream begins to shift southwards, we actually go onto the cold side of a jet with showers and longer spells of rain rotating around the area of low pressure. It turns very, very unsettled and really cool too. No detail on this, but I assume there must have been flooding with these areas of low pressure, and some pretty miserable daytime temperatures as well, to only achieve a CT of 14.7. There must have been some very cool and wet days in there indeed. We do have a go at pulling up some hotter air from the south there on the 25th. Looks like we're having a go at pulling up some heat from the 25th, but nothing really comes of it. By 27th, we're back into those cooler, showery, westerly winds once again. And this is how we end the summer of 1941, actually starting to build a ridge up from the southwest again, begin to build a ridge up from the Azores High as we come to the end of this very strange summer of 1941. So that takes us into the autumn of 1941. Of course, we always like to have a look at the autumn when we do these winter videos, because very often you can get clues and sort of clues and tidbits and heads up, if you like, from the atmosphere about what's going to happen as you go a few months ahead. So let's see if we get any of those as we go through this autumn. We begin on the 1st of September, 1941. Now, this is another contrast, because after the hot July, the cool, wet autumnal August, we actually go into a very dry and warm September. It's actually the third driest September of the 20th century. It has a CT of 14.5, which by modern standards, that's probably not that warm. We do get warmer Septembers now in the 15s and 16s with the CET, but for then, I think that was really quite a warm September, and also a very, very dry month indeed. And the reason is, again, the extension from the Azores High. So here we are on the 1st of September 1941, again with high pressure dominating weather, not just across the UK, but across many western parts of Europe as well. And this high pressure fest goes on through the first week. Look at those upper air temperatures, so that's going to be lifting temperatures into the mid to possibly upper 20 Celsius. Again, there's no detail with this, but interpreting the chart, I think that must have lifted temperatures at least to 25 degrees there through the first week of September, possibly even higher than that. We're up to the 9th of September, and we're still under this large area of high pressure at 1,030 millibars, and a fabulous extended summer. And up to the 12th, again, the high pressure continues. It just starts to pull out to our west a little bit, starts to allow some slightly cooler air in from the northwest. But overall, we're still high and dry here on the 12th of September. Look at that, by the 16th, the high is actually back in over the top of the country once again. Absolutely incredible how this high pressure fest just goes on and on. 18th of September, again, high pressure over and to the east of the country Once again, it's bringing loads of dry and fine conditions. 21st of September sees no real change for high pressure goes on. You can see why it was the third driest September of the 20th century, can't you? Because it is just continuous high pressure dominating from beginning to end. Or nearly to end. Now, we've got to 25th of September, so we're coming towards the end of the month, and we're just beginning to weaken the ridge. The ridge is just beginning now to slip over towards eastern parts of Europe. Low pressure is beginning to develop in the Atlantic. Initially, this is starting to put up a very warm southerly wind, so this probably still lifts temperatures certainly to the low 20s, maybe even like to the upper 20 Celsius, but it is a weakening of the high pressure. So as we come towards month's end, we start to bring low pressure in off the Atlantic. The high is having a really good go at trying to hold on. He's trying to get itself up to Scandinavia as well, but really it's a low pressure from the Atlantic that is breaking this area of high pressure down. So we've come to the end of September and the ridge is finally starting to break, or is it? Let's go through to October, shall we? This is October of 1941, and what's going to happen here is that the high pressure is going to come back in from the southwest again. So that the ridge has dominated throughout September. That's gone off over to what is now eastern parts of Europe, of course, and the ridge of high pressure is building up from the southwest, another ridge from the Azores. So we come to the 2nd of October 1941, and we're back under high pressure again, and this time it's a new area of high pressure that has built up, excuse me, it's built up from the Azores. So Trevor Harley writes with this one, the month had a very warm, fine start with some hot days, sunshine and fog at night. 24 Celsius, 75 Fahrenheit was recorded in the southeast on the 1st and also on the 2nd of September, and as well on the 6th and on the 7th of September. Absolutely remarkable to be lifting temperatures still into mid-20 Celsius during early October. Look at the high pressure. Again, it's gone over to our east. We're drawing up winds from that very warm southerly to southeast direction. There was night fog involved with this because it's back before the Clean Air Act, so any high pressure like at this time of year is going to start to produce some nasty fog. But overall, this is a really good Indian summer. And again, we're at the 7th of October, we're bringing up southerly winds again, and temperatures again lifting to around 24 degrees Celsius. High pressure is beginning to weaken a little bit as we go through to the 8th, beginning to try and get itself up towards Greenland and Iceland as well. Get to the 10th of October and we start to turn unsettled then. Low pressure begins to come in from off the Atlantic. That starts to bring showers or longer spells of rain with it as a high pressure starts to head up towards the Norwegian Sea. But high pressure comes back in on the 12th. Now, this is a cooler area of high pressure, of course. So we changed the air mass. We're no longer drawing the air up from southern Europe. We're actually drawing the air in from, like, northern Europe around this ridge of high pressure. So temperatures would start to take a tumble at this point, probably returning close to average. Another change on the 14th of October sees the high pressure begin to slip down to our south. We start to bring in this westerly wind. So we start to turn more unsettled from off the Atlantic. And, of course, this is much more traditional type autumn fare with high pressure to our south, low pressure to our north, winds in from the west, and probably turning rather wet and windy up in the northern half of the country. There we go again. We got to 24th of October and we're back under the high pressure once again. High pressure begins to take over the weather, but this time we're pulling in the wind from an east to northeast direction. It's beginning to turn colder, and Trevor Hardy writes, but after that very hot start to the month, very hot first week, he says, however, it became colder with showers as the winds changed to northerlies in the closing days of the month. So what's this high pressure going to do? Let's have a look. And there it goes. We start to see retrogression beginning to appear through the first week of October of 1941. So there's a high pressure on the 24th sitting over the top of the country. But there's a high pressure on the 27th. It's retrogressed out into the Atlantic and it's starting to reach northwards. That's always interesting. When you see high pressure retrogressing, tells you that something a little bit different is happening within the atmosphere. That's the 28th of October 1941. Is this our first real hint, heads up from the atmosphere about what's going to happen in the winter? Remember, we are going to get to winter shortly, and it's going to be a really cold winter as well. Is this a heads up from the atmosphere? Possibly. So the high pressure goes out into the Atlantic and starts to reach up towards Greenland, Iceland. Low pressure begins to plunge down North Sea, and there's the winds turning into the north. We start pulling some proper northerlies as we go through to the end of October. This probably brings wintry showers into Scotland. There's a -5 Celsius ice firm plunging southwards into Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Northern England as well. That's how we look on the last day of October 1941. Halloween 1941 has high pressure to our north and west, quite blocked. Again, possibly a bit of a hint from the atmosphere about what's going to happen. Quite blocked to our north and west. Low pressures to our south-southeast. Low pressures dived through Europe with the jet stream plunging down into Italy, taking unsettled and quite cold conditions with it through to the end of October 1941. Then the high pressure begins to set up over Scandinavia as we move into November. So this is how things look on the 1st of November 1941. All we have to go on with this is that it's a dull and mild month. With a central temperature of 6.6. By the way, October 1941 has a central temperature of 10.4. So after that very hot start to October 1941, actually the CT doesn't come out all that far from average. That's probably down to what happens in the last week. The first week is hot. The middle 2 weeks are close to average. The last week is cold. It all offsets one another. And we come out with CT in October 10.4. But November CT is 6.6. Generally dull and mild. That's all we've got to go on. So let's see what happens. Well, it looks quite cold as we begin November 1941, doesn't it? With high pressure over Scandinavia and winds are in from the east. Let's see what happens. So, again, we keep those easterlies going into the 3rd of November. Probably not particularly cold easterly, but they would have a chill to them. So I think the first week of November 1941 is quite cold. And below average temperature, definitely with night frost, maybe even kind of wintry showers on the east coast. The upper air temperatures are looking quite cold for early November. What's going to happen to bring us out with a relatively mild month? I assume the Atlantic is going to break that, but let's have a look. We were up the 5th of November, bonfire night, 1941, has high pressure very much still dominating the weather close to the country. But as we go through to the 6th and through to the 7th of November, we start to pull in some colder winds from the north. So definitely quite cold first opening week to November of 1941. However, this is what's going to happen. The high pressure then collapses, blocking the area of high pressure collapses, and we start to bring in low pressure then from off the Atlantic. Winds change direction, swinging to the south. The areas of low pressure obviously bring outbreaks of rain in from off the Atlantic. And it turns a lot milder. That's the 12th of November 1941. A battle is going on in the atmosphere at this point with the Scandinavian high up there to our northeast and low pressure out in the Atlantic. Remember that chart. You are going to see that occurring or reoccurring quite a lot when we get into the winter. I think that 12th of November 1941 is definitely a heads up from the atmosphere about what's coming. So battle's going on at this point. We're not cold. We're drawing the air up from the south, and we've got a lot of heavy rain as well. The high pressure tries to really intensify over Scandinavia up to 1,055 millibars, but it is actually being thwarted by the Atlantic. Just these areas of low pressure still rolling in from off the Atlantic, bring us probably the first continuous spell of very wet weather that we've had throughout this autumn of 1941, to be fair. So it had been a long time coming. We continue this sort of meteorological battle really between high pressure to our east and northeast and low pressure to our west on the 22nd of November. And still the winds ploughing from the west to southwest, bouts of rain heading from off the Atlantic as well. And that's how we look as we come towards the end of November 1941. Still mild generally, but the high pressure is beginning to intensify to our east. It's not in a position to bring cold weather to us really. Low pressure is sort of slipping away to our south. Yeah, just a little bit of a heads up that the high pressure was able to break the Atlantic in the end. So we're in a relatively dry and mild scenario there, probably very damp, and I would have thought probably a lot of mist and fog and murk going on with that as well. So we've come to the end of the autumn of 1941. I'm going to put a break in there. We've been talking for nearly 20 minutes. Going to put a break in, and when we return, we're going to go into the winter of 1941, 1942, and you will see why this was the third member of the Frozen Forties that trilogy of incredibly cold winters from 1939, 1940 to 1941, 1942. So I'll pause the video there, go and get yourself a cup of tea, some biscuits, or whatever you like to nibble when you're watching our historic web videos, and we'll see you back here very, very shortly. Okay, we're back. And we're ready to resume episode 3 of the Frozen Forties, looking at winter of 1941-1942. So we've discussed the autumn, of course, of the late summer and autumn of 1941. Now we're going to move on into the winter of 1941-1942. Very, very cold winter indeed. Just say that if you're enjoying the historic web video, then please give us a like on the video. Let us know in the comments what you think. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that would be absolutely great. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing that. It's very, very warm here in Glasgow-Village Towers while I'm recording. It's been a really warm day. It's Wednesday, 20th of May, 2020. It's been our hottest day of the year so far, so I'm very, very warm doing this. I may need to stop, have a drink of water because the throat is feeling quite dry, but we'll get through it. Right, so let's crack on then, and we're going to go through to December of 1941. Here we are. Thursday of December 1941, and the pattern that we've had throughout much of November really continues, with high pressure sitting over Scandinavia across central and eastern parts of Europe. Low pressure is out in the Atlantic. Notice these cold northerly winds coming in around the back of the high. That's really building up a cold pool across western parts of Russia. That'll be important for later on. But at this point, we're still relatively mild, actually, with high pressure to our east, low pressure to the west. Winds remain from the south. All we have to go on with this one is that central temperature is 5.6. And Trevor Harley writes that it's generally dry and anticyclonic. It's also milder than average. Let's see what happens then. So, we can see why it's generally an anticyclonic month. On the 3rd of December 1941, we're under an area of high pressure at 1,040 millibars. By the 6th, the high pressure is slipping away to our south. We're starting to bring in more of a westerly flow, so that's turning rather wet and windy, particularly for northern and western parts of the country. By the 10th, we're very unsettled, actually, seemingly very unsettled anyway, with, again, low pressure driving in from the Atlantic, bringing plenty of rain with it. Heading up to the middle part of the month, again, looking rather zonal, wet and windy, low pressure to our north, high pressure to our south. I think probably for southern areas, it's not overly wet, but close to the ridge from the Azores high. But for the north, probably really quite wet indeed. There's absolutely no hint here, is there, of the frozen January that's to come. We're only 2 weeks away from January 1942. And there's absolutely no hint of it at this stage. So let's see what's going to happen. Well, that's interesting. We go through to the 18th. So that's the 16th. We've got this area of low pressure north of Scotland. High pressure is sort of across France, Spain, Portugal, much of the Med. And high pressure is also out in the Atlantic as well. But by the time we get through to the 18th, we start to see the high pressure begin to reposition. So the jet stream has suddenly plunged southwards. High pressure is starting to develop over the UK, but it is also beginning to extend the ridge up towards Scandinavia and western parts of Russia. So we're at the 21st of December 1941 now, and milder winds are beginning to come in from off the Atlantic for Scandinavia and northern Scotland. The rest of us are under this area of high pressure, looking mostly dry, but potentially rather cold and frosty too. Well, that's Christmas Eve of 1941, and the high pressure is just beginning to pull out to our southwest, starting to allow some northwesterly winds to begin to filter in around the top of the high pressure. Probably quite a mildish sort of Christmas Eve. By Christmas Day, we're having a go at turning wind into the north. So again, just a few hints here, but nothing overly dramatic at this point. We have got quite a deep cold pool dropping southwards across northern Europe, however. 2 deep areas of low pressure. This is the polar vortex up here towards the north of Scandinavia. And this is another area of low pressure that's like a piece of energy that's come off polar vortex. And this is all driving very cold air down to Northern Europe. So Northern Europe has turned really cold. For us, we're kind of on the periphery of it. I suspect there would have been, if this was now, there would be a bit of excitement because it would be very close to a white Christmas, but then a lot of disappointment because it wouldn't actually be a white Christmas, just mainly dry and possibly a little bit on the frosty side. There's the upper air temperature showing that we are on the periphery now of some really quite cold air that's sitting up to both the north to the east of us on Christmas Day 1941. However, for us, generally, the upper air temperatures are still mild. Wouldn't be that mild on the surface, though, with the high pressure probably producing quite a bit of frost. That's Boxing Day of 1941. Again, the high pressure very close to the country. Cold winds, though, are plunging southwards from the north across many northern parts of Europe. Look how that cold pool is intensifying to our north and northeast. A really deep cold pool is setting up. And again, 27th of December, just on the periphery. It's very close to quite a freezing sort of Christmas week, but we're just on the periphery of it. High pressure is just not quite aligned to be pulling in the coldest of that air, but it is a close run thing. And actually, by the 28th, we are starting to bring the minus 10 Celsius ice in towards eastern parts of Britain. So we are now going into genuinely cold air as we come towards the end of December 1941. Certainly this ridge is getting much, much colder now. So certainly there will be hard overnight frost as we come up towards the new year of 1941. No particularly snowy or big freeze type weather, but definitely under that high pressure things are getting much, much colder. That's how we end 1941. This is New Year's Eve of 1941. Again, we're under that area of high pressure and we're bringing in mainly dry conditions. It's both dry and high, but it would be cold as we've already established quite a cold wind from the north and from the northeast too. And then we move on into January of 1942, and this is how things are looking in January of 1942. This is New Year's Day of 1942. And overall, yes, we are still dominated by high pressure, really. So high pressure continues to be sitting very close to the country. It's cold in that area of high pressure as well, of course. That's the 2nd of January 1942. So the high pressure should begin to slip southwards. You might think that we're going to start to re-establish a milder southwest wind. That's not quite how this is going to go, to say the least, because January of 1942 is actually the 8th coldest January of the 20th century. Trevor Harley again says, note there was a run of consecutive cold Januaries in the early war years, 1940, 1941. This is the 3rd, 1942. And it only has a CET of 0.9, so it is very, very nearly has a negative CET actually this January. So let's see what's going to happen as we roll on through the course of this month. So again, we're at the beginning of January 1942. We're overall looking quite sort of mildish here on the 3rd. Winds are in from the southwest. It doesn't look as though we've got a particularly cold month on our hands at all. But on the 4th of January 1942, we start to push this low pressure through across the country, and a ridge begins to move northwards up towards Greenland and Iceland, and that starts to swing the winds into the north and to the northeast as well. There's a cold front that's dropping southwards, probably bringing a band of rain, and I would have thought also behind that, the air turning cold enough to bring snow to northern and eastern parts of the country. Upper air temperatures show the minus 10 Celsius isotherm digging into the far north. Scotland minus 5 Celsius isotherm is into Northern Ireland, Northern England. Further south, it still looks so we're holding on to mild-ish air, but that's going to be swept away very, very quickly by those northerly winds. And now we are into what will be for the rest of the month a very cold month. So this is the 6th of January 1942. Doesn't look overly dramatic at this point, but winds are in from the north and from the northeast, and it's certainly cold enough now to be bringing in snow showers to northern and eastern parts of the country. Moving through to the 9th of January 1942, we begin to get an area of low pressure developing in the North Sea. That's quite interesting. Low pressure starts to develop in the North Sea and begins to push our way, begins to push into eastern parts of the UK. That will not only bring snow showers, it will probably start to bring longer spells of snow into eastern parts of the country as well. The low pressure vein slips southwards, and we begin to get high pressure building over Scandinavia. So gradually, incrementally, step by step, we are moving into an increasingly severe pattern as well of weather. It didn't look much as it started off, what was it, around the 4th, 5th of January, with that ridge in the middle of the Mid-Atlantic ridge. It didn't look like much then, but very gradually, day by day, incrementally, we are starting to set up another severe cold January. So the low pressure begins to slip southwards in towards northern parts of France. That would bring heavy outbreaks of snow to many southern and eastern parts of the country. There's the upper air temperatures. They don't look overly dramatically cold, but we have got a very deep cold pool that's sitting to our east and northeast, and it is easily cold enough for snow to be falling. Now, that's the 12th of January 1942, and we're having a go at re-establishing a bit of an Atlantic flow, but notice the ridge building over Scandinavia at 1,030 millibars. So we get through to the 13th of January 1942, and now we are establishing a battle. Remember, I told you to keep in mind that pattern we saw in the first part of the video, where we got the high pressure over Scandinavia, the low pressure in the Atlantic, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object coming up against one another, and that's what's going on here. So we've got a band of heavy rain coming in from off the Atlantic, but not only heavy rain, as it bumps into the cold area. I've got quite a deep cold pool sitting to our east now. As it bumps into the cold pool, we would also have been seeing the rain turning readily to snow. That's the 14th of January 1942, and the weather system that was trying to come in from the Atlantic is stalling. So again, the system has come up against the block sitting over Scandinavia. There's a stall of the weather front going on. Rain would be rapidly turning to snow, heavy snow, easily supported by the upper air temperatures. Battle continues on the 15th, although the high pressure actually is winning the battle at this point across Scandinavia. Winds are turning into more of a southeasterly. They're starting to bring in cold air from, remember, what is a snow-covered and frozen continent at this point. And then the Atlantic has another go on the 16th. So next low pressure is trying to desperately come in from the Atlantic. Winds are southerlies, but remember, the continent is cold. France will be covered with snow, really. So this is, again, dragging in cold winds from the south, bitterly cold southerly winds. And as the low pressure heads in from the Atlantic, again, it is stalling. When you see how the isobars sort of elongating out, that tells us the front is stalling as it comes up against a blocking area of high pressure. There's the upper air temperatures. They would be supporting rain and snow with that. Low pressure then slipping away to the south, so weather front has again come up against the cold air. It's stalled, and then a low pressure has developed along it, probably a triple point low, and it's slipping away into northern parts of France. Again, that could be another snow event. This isn't the end of the battle, though. This is the 18th through to the 19th of January 1942. And the Atlantic is going to have yet another go to displace this blocking area of high pressure over Scandinavia. And Trevor Harley writes, there was a great snowstorm across Britain on the 19th of January 1942, causing widespread disruption. And let's see what's going to happen then. What's going to cause this snowstorm? Well, you can see the contrast in the temperatures. So we've got a very warm air mass, or mild air mass, just out to our west, but we have got a cold air mass sitting to our east with that blocking area of high pressure. A weather front's moving in from the Atlantic. Again, it is stalling, and the cold air is undercutting that front from off the frozen snow-covered continent. And so here, from the 19th through to 20th, there's outbreaks of heavy, persistent snow across many parts of the country. Winds are southerly to southeasterly. You wouldn't think that would be particularly cold, but it's due to the cold air that's already been established up to this point. Strong winds as well, so there will be drifting and blizzards causing disruption. Remember, if you're in that yellow area, it can't snow. That's a 0 Celsius isotherm. So for South Wales, Southwest England into like Southwest Midlands, that's probably rain or freezing rain. But elsewhere, within this green area just here, it can snow. If the dew points are cold enough, the dew points would be below freezing with this, as the continent is frozen and snow covered. We get through to the 21st of January 1942, and the high pressure over Scandinavia has won the battle. Look at that, 1,045 millibars, beginning to turn wind into the east-southeast. The low pressures are being rescinded out to the north and to the west, and things are starting to turn drier, but also colder as well. Now look at that deep cold pool that's sitting across Europe on the 22nd of January 1942. Almost hear the theme tune from Jaws playing with that. Very, very severe cold pool now is established across many parts of northern Europe. Are we going to get into those extremely cold winds from the east? Let's have a look. This is 23rd of January 1942. Another system's having a go to dislodging the Scandinavian high from the Atlantic. That's probably bringing more heavy rain and snow to northern parts of the country. Again, look how severe the cold pool is just to our east. Absolutely remarkable. That's the 24th of January 1942. Again, another system's coming across the country. That probably bringing more snow with it. Really, nothing has happened, I don't think, to introduce any milder air at this point. So that's probably going to be a snowy scenario as well. And we've got this area of low pressure out to our northwest as well. That starts to drop into the country on the 25th of January 1942. Now, at this point, we look poised to pull in those exceptionally cold winds from the east. Because what you think this low pressure is going to do, as it slides in that sort of direction, you will think it's going to go down there and allow this very extreme cold pool of air sitting to our east to push in from the east. So let's see if that happens. This would, by the way, be bringing a lot of heavy snow with it once again. Look at the cold pool that's over Scandinavia now. Extraordinarily cold air is sitting across northern Europe with a minus 25 Celsius ice firm involved across parts of the Baltic Sea. But these areas of low pressure just don't allow that extreme cold pool of air in. So this is very snowy though. It's not allowing the extreme cold pool in, but with such cold air to the east and also cold air sort of digging in from the North Atlantic again along these fronts, and we've had so much of this through this winter, through this January, along these elongations of the low pressures, there will be further outbreaks of heavy snow. There's the upper air temperatures. Again, we're so close to that extreme cold pool of air that would take temperatures down into like the minus 20s quite easily. 27th of January 1942 sees a next low pressure trying to come in from off the Atlantic. Again, it's bumping into cold air. We're just on the periphery of that extreme freeze up across northern parts of Europe. But the low pressure across the North Atlantic is what starts to win the battle this time. So we begin to push that cold pool of air away from us. It just doesn't quite get in, but it was enough. It was close enough to us to mean that as those low pressures come up against that extreme cold pool, it brought a lot of snow through the last week of January 1942. And we haven't turned mild. We're still cold even now with low pressure over the top of the country, jet streams to our south. We're cold and wintry, certainly cold enough for snow, even as we come to the end of this frozen January of 1942. I mean, we've got another low pressure diving in from the northwest. There it is on the 30th of January up to the south of Greenland. Look where it is on the last day of the month. It's crossing the west. Again, that's probably another snow event pushing across many parts of the country, bringing an end to this really cold January that has a central temperature of only 0.9 degrees. Very cold month indeed. Freezing cold and snowy. And yeah, it's third in a trilogy of frozen Januaries. But it's not the end of the story, though. I'm going to pause the video there. Again, throat's getting a little bit dry, so I'm going to have a drink of water. I'll pause the video there. We'll meet back for part 3, and we'll look at the rest of this winter. And there's a very cold February to come as well with this. So more very shortly. Okay, we're back. And we're ready to resume the third and final part of episode 3 of Frozen Forties, looking at winter of 1941-1942. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. We've still got a little bit more to show you. Please give us a like on the video. Let us know in the comments what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So before the break, we was actually talking about January of 1942 and the freezing cold and snowy weather that we had then. So we're going to go on now. I had a little cough before just after I paused the video. So I may have to stop and have a drink of water, have a cough again. I may hope I don't have a bit of a cough fit, but the throat is not feeling very good right now. So I might have to pause the video quite suddenly and sort of have a bit of a cough, but we'll see how we get on. Anyway, I want to get this done tonight for you, so we're just gonna see how we go. But if I have to suddenly stop or mute the mic or something, have a real cough, then just bear with me. But I am going to get through this tonight. I'm determined to do that. So we were talking about the freezing cold January of 1942. Now we are into February of 1942. So here we go. This is the first day of February 1942. And this is another very, very cold month. Actually, February 1942 is even colder than January of 1942. So we know that January has a central temperature of 0.9. February 1942 gets extraordinarily close to being a negative CT month with a central temperature of just plus 0.1. It's very, very close to being a negative CT month. It's the 10th coldest February since 1659 and the 8th coldest February of the 20th century. Quite remarkable. So, we're at the 1st of January 1942. We're bringing the winds from the west, or trying to. We're trying to bring in some milder air from off the Atlantic, which is probably still quite cold, more southern and east. As I would imagine for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it is probably warming up a little bit now as we're beginning to bring the wind in from off the Atlantic. So we are probably starting to a little bit less cold. However, not for long. Look at this. By the 5th of February, low pressure has slipped away to our south again. High pressure is established over Scandinavia. Winds are back in from the east. This is bringing much colder air from the east again. There's the upper air temperatures showing the minus 10 Celsius firm heading in from the east. Yes, that could well be bringing some snow showers with it to eastern parts of the country. 7th of February 1942 looks cold again, with high pressure out to our west and also to our east and northeast as well. Looks like we can have a go at bringing in some milder winds from off the Atlantic once again, but not really, because we get through to the 12th of February 1942. And although we've got high pressure to the south and low pressure to the north, the wind is starting to back into the north again. So by the 14th, by Valentine's Day 1942, high pressure sort of over to the north, northeast, northwest of the country. Low pressure is to our east. Winds are coming in from an east to northeasterly direction, and then we set up a big area of high pressure from Siberia, really. This is a Siberian high pushing into Scandinavia by the 17th. A proper bitterly cold easterly wind establishing there, bringing cold air in from a frozen snow-covered continent. Remember, there's been nothing to happen to thaw the continent out, so we've had many weeks now of frozen ground and snow-covered ground across most parts of northern Europe. Anything from the east is going to be bitterly cold at this point. The upper air temperatures don't look dramatically cold, but the surface level cold is going to be extremely cold with dew points way, way below freezing. Unfortunately, we can't show the dew points, but if we was able to, they would be extremely cold dew points indeed. So this would cause pipe bursting, frost temperatures probably going down into minus double digits, I would have thought, by night, and staying below freezing all day. Unfortunately, we don't have much information about this from Tower Harley in terms of the daytime maxima and the nighttime minima, but there must have been many, many days through this January and February where the temperature did not exceed freezing all day and night times went down into minus double digits. There's the upper air temperatures for the 20th of January 1942. We see that we've got the minus 10 Celsius again sitting across the eastern side of the country. 21st of January 1942 looks like that. Again, winds are in from an east-southeasterly direction. Proper blocked conditions. Low pressure is out to southwest. High pressure is up to the north and northeast. We're actually developing our own cold pool here, which is quite unusual. If I take you back with those upper air temperatures to the 20th, they're not excessively cold close to the UK, but look how they are by the 21st. So we are developing our own sort of cold pool here across Northern Europe anyway, so kind of like Denmark, Northern Germany, low country. Again, that's because of how frozen the ground is. So we've got the minus 10 Celsius isotherm pushing through the UK there. Minus 15 Celsius isotherm is just to our east. This is easily cold enough for these easty winds to be bringing in snow, probably snow showers, maybe longer spells of snow as well, particularly for more eastern and southern areas, with this low pressure to our south and generally quite weak pressure over to the east of the country. Very cold day on the 22nd of February 1942 with the UK enveloped within the minus 10 Celsius. So again, daytime temperatures will be below freezing all day, and nights will be falling into minus double digits where skies are clear, I would have thought. Heading up towards the last week of the month, still cold and unsettled, more low pressure very close to the country, bringing further outbreaks of snow into many parts of the country, I would have thought. It's also very dull, so particularly for East Anglia, where they're barely average an hour of sunshine a day, unfortunately, across East Anglia. So invariably, with our coldest winter months, it tends to be very dull at times as well. Moving through towards the end of February 1942, we then just begin to start to re-establish something a little bit milder in from off the Atlantic. And that's how we look as we end February 1942 and the winter of 1941-1942. Actually, we're ending it on a milder note. A thaw now is taking place. It would be quite a slow thaw, I would have thought. But very gradually, we are lifting up the temperature now as winds turn into the southwest. The upper air temperatures look a lot less cold. So finally, we see milder winds off the Atlantic breaking through and ending this sort of 2-month period of very, very cold, severely cold, and snowy conditions. It's not quite the end of it, though, because we move through into March, and there's going to be a lot of very extreme variation during March of 1942. So we begin, again, still sort of blocked really, with high pressure to our north and east, low pressure is out to our west and southwest. And then we go back into this pattern that we've had on and off throughout the winter of high pressure to the east, low pressure to the west. Winds are in from the south. It's probably relatively mild on the 3rd, but still, the continent is still very cold and frozen and snow-covered. And so here we go again. We're back into this battle that we first saw this back in November, I think. Could have been late October, but certainly I think we saw it in November 1941. Here we are in March 1942, and we're back into this battle again. High pressure over Scandinavia, low pressure out to west. Winds are coming in from the south, but begin to tilt more southeasterly. Colder air is beginning to undercut from off the continent once again. Upper air temperatures look relatively mild, but it's the surface temperatures for dew points that's all important. As these low pressures and weather systems come up against the high pressure blocking over Scandinavia, they begin to stall. Cold air begins to dig in from the east again. More snow is developing there as we go through to the 5th of March 1942. So actually, the maximum temperature in Birmingham on the 6th of March 1942, this day, is only -3. And the reason for that is that there's been a snow event caused by the contrast of very cold air to the northeast that we have here on the 5th, milder air out to the west. There's been a snow event, and the low pressure sort of slipped away to the south, and the winds are in from the east-southeast again. We're bringing in bitterly cold air from the east once more. Upper air temperatures actually looking very, very cold, especially for northern and northeastern parts of the country. So I would have thought maximum below freezing, quite widespread there again on the 6th of March of 1942. 7th also looking cold and wintry, more snow likely in more southern parts of the country. From that one, upper air temperatures are still cold. But then there's going to be another change as we go further on into the month. We're going to get to the 19th of March, and we're going to see temperatures begin to lift up into double digits. But on the 8th of March, we had -18 as our minimum temperature at Braemar. But by the 19th, we're going to be up to 13 Celsius at Croydon. Absolutely remarkable how March can be so very changeable. And again, we see the reason why. This is 12th of March, 42. We're bringing up winds from the south now. So we're losing the cold easterlies, turning wind into the south. And unlike before, where the southerlies were quite cold, because France was frozen snow snow-covered. Now, it's a long fetch southerly that's dragging up much milder air from southern Europe. Look at the upper air temperatures now for the 14th of March. What a contrast. And those severely cold upper air temperatures are sort of plunging through the eastern side of Europe, or being pushed back to the eastern side of Europe. So now we go off and running into a much milder spell of weather, lifting temperatures into double digits. 13 degrees was recorded on the 19th, for example, at Croydon. It's going to get even warmer as we go through to the 25th. This day, we're going to get up to 18 Celsius at Farnborough, into the 60s Fahrenheit, when earlier on in the month it was frozen and snow-covered. So real contrast. The overall CT comes out at 5.2, which I don't think is too far from average, but it does mask a very changeable month indeed. And we finish March 1942 on a wet and windy note. So I'll just run you through a couple more months, and then I think that will be pretty much it for this historic weather video. So let's just change over me notes. I'm going to change over me notes. Go through to April 1942. It has central temperature of 9.2. This is another, as well as being renowned for very cold winters, and particularly cold in January in the 1940s, the 1940s are also renowned for their very warm Aprils, and this is another one of them with a CT of 9.2. Starting April 1942 on a wet and windy note with low pressure in from off the Atlantic, but by the middle of the month, high pressure developing over Scandinavia again. This time it's a very different complexion though, as winds are coming in from a southerly southeast direction. That's lifting temperatures a lot. That really is boosting temperatures indeed. Trevor Hardy writes about this one. It's a very sunny month, and also it's warm. It's the first in a run of above average Aprils that took place from 1942 all the way through to 1949. So high pressure dominating. It's still a Scandinavian high really, but it's a different air mass compared to what we had in the winter. It's a much warmer air mass indeed. A little bit more unsettled there for a while in the third week of the month, and then we go towards the end of April 1942, and we're still dominated by high pressure, and winds remain from an easterly direction. Trevor Harvey writes that the final week from the 24th to 30th was extremely sunny, and there was no rain recorded in much of England from the 10th of April to the 9th of May. The UK saw an average of 205 hours of sunshine, a record until 2015. So after that gloomy cold winter, we find ourselves going into a very sunny April, and also a very warm April as well. May 1942 has a central temperature of 11.1. It's fine in the first days, and then gradually turns more unsettled, so high pressure dominates for much of the time until things start to break down. Later on in the month turns wet and windy as we go through to the final week of May 1942. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I'm going to show. I've got something up for June. So June 1942 has central temperature of 14.4. It's a very dry month. It begins hot with 30 degrees on the 5th, 86 Fahrenheit, under this big area of high pressure that continues to rule the roost. Look at that classic summer chart for the 5th of June 1942. Upper air temperatures looking very hot indeed. And then the high pressure pulls out to the west, so on the 8th. By the time you get through to the 12th of June, we actually go into a cold northerly, and that starts bringing some wintry showers into the Scottish mountains. Look at the contrasting temperature on the 12th of June 1942. Very hot in the south, but quite cold, colder for Stowell Mountains in the north. Looks quite unsettled around the middle of June 1942 with showers or longer spells of rain, and then we go back to high pressure again through the latter stages of the month. It's a very dry month, June 1942, for England and for Wales too. Right then, so that's it. That is the end of our Frozen Forties trilogy. In the last three videos, we have covered the winter of 1939-1940. We've covered the winter of 1940-1941. And now, at the end, we've covered the winter of 1941-1942. Of course, we started off with what was like a prologue that we did for the August Bank Holiday Monday, where we looked at the winter of 1938-1939, so just before the outbreak of the Second World War. So we've done a prologue, we've done 3 episodes, I think now we need an epilogue, don't we? So I think we've got to end this with the end of the war, really. So the next couple of winters, not much happens. 42, 43, 43, 44, they're generally just mild, not overly exciting winters at all. Our next quite interesting winter is 1944, 1945. And we'll cover that in our epilogue video to the Frozen Forties, which will be on August Bank Holiday Monday. We'll extend it as well so we can see what the weather was like as we come to the end of the Second World War during April and May of 1945. I think we need to end this trilogy properly. We're going to end it with an epilogue on August Bank Holiday Monday. We'll have a look at both winter of 1944, 1945, and we'll also see what the weather was doing as the war finally, after 6 years of hardship and suffering, the war finally comes to an end in the spring of 1945. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your Bank Holiday Monday with us today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed doing this Frozen Forties trilogy probably more than any other historic weather video that I've done. Weather videos that I've done, actually. You know I like my trilogy anyway, but I think this one has been really, really interesting. I think it's been high quality. The information we've given has been really good. So I just hope you enjoyed it, enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed creating it for you. We aren't quite done, as I say. There will be the epilogue, which is going to sort of end this trilogy and end the story with the weather for the end of the war. We'll have that for you on August Bank Holiday Monday. But thank you so much, everybody, for spending your spring Bank Holiday Monday with us. Please give us a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Keep checking back to GazWeathers.com and let us know in the comments what you thought to the video. And at 55 minutes, I'm going to end the video there. And enjoy the rest of your Bank Holiday money. Videos and updates will be back to normal at Gaz Weather Vids tomorrow, of course, so it'll all be back to normal tomorrow. But enjoy what's left of your Bank Holiday Monday. And yeah, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.